When you start your business, no one ever prepares you for what's in store. So, finding someone else who just gets it is sometimes the thing that can keep you pushing toward that big business goal.
We're turning our Zoom coffee chats into a weekly, unfiltered podcast for online business owners. They were so good, we always wanted to record them and repurpose them for content, anyways. And that's on being a social media manager.
I'm Jessica Sheehy.
And I'm Madeline Daigan, and this is
#managed.
Happy Monday, friends. Welcome back to #managed. For some reason, Jessica and Harmony haven't revoked my podcast privileges, so here I am with another solo episode. If you're a dedicated listener and have tuned in for the past 4 weeks, thank you. Your support honestly means the world to me and gives me a great ego boost. And for any first time listeners, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. If today's episode title caught your eye, I'm especially glad you decided to join us. This topic is one I feel isn't discussed enough among social media marketers, and I hope to shed some light on it today. But before we dive into that, let me share my weekend recap, and then we'll move on to our three other segments. So, again, if you are new here, this is normally where Jessica and I will discuss our weekend recaps. My weekend recap includes being in Grand Haven, Michigan for my college roommate's bachelorette party. So if we have any Michigan listeners, just know I was in your neck of the woods this past weekend. But my weekend also included 18 hours plus of traveling back to Charleston, and the majority of which was spent sleeping overnight in the Charlotte airport. So, to make a long story short, I was supposed to leave Michigan at 16 p.m. on Sunday. I didn't leave Michigan until midnight. I arrived in Charlotte at 1:30 a.m. and then my flight back to my 45-minute airplane ride flight back to Charleston wasn't until 7:30 a.m. So that was fun, and immediately after that I went to work. So yeah, it was I have been tired this week, and I feel like I'm finally caught up on sleep. So anyways, while I was waiting to get back home to Charleston, I ended up finishing Bridgerton, and I loved it. And now I'm like, how many years do I have to wait for the next season? Also, I'm laughing because I know I told you guys, I think it was on my 30th podcast episode, I think that I wasn't going to watch too much television or shows, and here I am binging Bridgerton. Anyways, that is Madeline's weekend recap. Let's move on to the water cooler. So, I pulled this week's water cooler from the free Facebook group again because I don't know what it is. You guys just don't seem to want to submit anything to the hashtag hotline, even just to say hi, which that's fine. That's fine. But hopefully, one of these days, we're going to get an influx and you guys are going to be like, oh my gosh, I hope they choose mine this week. I'm manifesting that. Anyways, this week's water cooler I pulled says, I recently signed on a mental health therapist for social media management. She wants to grow her account and ideally reach more clients. What kinds of accounts should we engage with for effective community engagement? First of all, I'm jealous. What a fantastic account to manage. Lucky for you, I have a few recommendations for accounts to follow that could enhance your community engagement. But before I get into that, I want to emphasize the importance of following local health and wellness accounts. While I don't know while I don't know your exact location, following local gyms and wellness centers can significantly, oh my goodness, boost local community engagement. And depending on your client's target market and specialization, you might also consider following some addiction centers, the local Boys and Girls Club, or even some veteran organizations. Um, I know that for therapists, or so I've heard, because I've never managed a therapist account, but I have discussed this with my own therapist before. Um, and obviously, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of rules around, following your clients. Like mine doesn't follow me. I can't really follow her. So that's where I'm gonna stop that. It's just like with local, again, local gyms, oh my goodness, local community centers and wellness centers. And then for some mental health accounts that the hashtag managed team and I love to follow, because I read this and then was asking Harmony what are some accounts that she also follows, and we've compiled a list of 10 accounts, and I'll be sure to include these in the newsletter as well as our social media. But they are My Therapist Says, which honestly is like a meme account, and I feel like your client could offer their 2 cents, where, yes, poke fun at things. Like, again, it's more of a humorous account, but you could also like play into that humor while also giving some sound advice. I don't know, that's just a thought. Then the Truth Doctor, which is the period truth dot period doctor. I had followed her social media manager for a while. She's not her social media manager anymore, but she the social media manager who helped kind of skyrocket her social account did such a beautiful job, in my opinion. So I really like that one. Then the next one is Headspace, which that's a given. Then I have Jay Shetty, because if you don't listen to On Purpose, that I really love that podcast, his podcast as well. And I've actually sent it to a few of my friends, one of which she now I know listens to it religiously as well. The next is um, We the Urban. Yes, We the Urban. Then The Happiness Project, The Brain Coach, Sit with Wit, The Holistic Psychologist, which is the period holistic period psychologist, and then BetterHelp. So hopefully you found that helpful, and we'll look into these accounts. I hope if you are listening to this, you report back to me. Let me know what you think, or again, if that was any helpful or was helpful. But moving on to Show Me the Numbers. For this week's Show Me the Numbers segment, I wanted to highlight some statistics about social media addiction. Many social media managers, I feel, tend to downplay this issue, but addiction is no laughing matter, and I believe it's crucial for us to have more conversations about this topic. While social media marketing has many benefits, we must also acknowledge its significant downsides. So, I have 5 statistics for you guys to ponder this week, and maybe these statistics aren't groundbreaking per se, but again, I feel like we downplay this, where we joke that, and we know that our screen time is higher than the average person, but it makes me wonder, are there ways that we can and should start to work on lessening that screen time? Yes, like where it's like we turn off our screens, or not turn off our screens. Maybe you do. But stop using our phone after 8 p.m. Like that's personally something I do. But it can be hard and challenging, because I know that like we're on our phones, we're on our screens doing our work, like our 9 to 5. And maybe it's not a 9 to 5. You get what I'm saying though, where It is our job. And then at the end of the day, it's like we kind of we haven't been engaging with our own audience, like our fun personal accounts during the day. I mean, maybe you do during your breaks. And again, is that truly a break? I don't know. I mean, it is, but is it the healthiest break, you know? So it's a double-edged sword, I believe, and kind of why I wanted to talk about this. I want to talk about this more with you guys and share more mental health insights and stats and ways that we can help each other. So, probably like, yeah, get to the point, Maddie. So, here are your 5 statistics to ponder this week. Number one, on average, users spend about 2 hours and 24 minutes per day on social media platforms, which adds up to over 16 hours a week, which I know for us social media managers has to be more. And as I was looking for these type of statistics, something I thought about is why are there no studies being done on social media marketers? Like your stats would change drastically, and I feel like these researchers would find out more information. I don't know. Food for thought. Number two, around 30% of social media users say they prioritize social media use over other important activities, including spending time with friends and family. I know myself have done this in the past, and I think that that contributed to my burnout, um, because I felt like I constantly had to be on, where I had notifications on and felt as if I needed to constantly respond and so on and so forth. And so again, this 30%, I'm like, us social media managers would really throw you a curveball here. But if you listening are like, oh shit, that is me, maybe we should have a come to Jesus moment. I don't know. I don't know. I know that I am here for you and I have been in your shoes and that there is a way out. I promise you there is a way out. Number 3, approximately 44% of teens admit to checking their social media accounts multiple times per hour, indicating a high level of dependency and frequency engagement. Ask yourself, how many times in an hour are you checking your phone? Or maybe you start to honestly tally it. I know that there's some apps out there and I can't remember the name. If I remember the name, again, shameless plug, I will include it in the newsletter. But I know for a fact that there is an app out there where you set it up that it makes you do an extra step. Like, I don't know if it's like you type in your, like in a code to open up the social media apps or what, but it basically makes you pause before you get onto your social media platforms, kind of asking yourself, why? Like, why am I checking this? Am I actually checking this to do a certain task? Again, I know I'm speaking to social media managers and marketers right now and online business owners. I know that is who I'm talking to. And if you aren't in one of those categories and are just one of my friends or somebody who's obsessed with Jessica and I, hey, I think this app is good because it makes you again pause to ask yourself and be more intentional with your social media time where and will help you prevent that doom scrolling. Again, I don't remember the name of it, but I will look at that for you guys. Then number 4, over 50% of social media users acknowledge that they may be addicted to social media, with many expressing difficulty in reducing their usage despite recognizing its negative impacts. 50%. But again, I don't know where per se these stats, well, I know where the stats are coming, but the percentage, with like how many people were involved, so on and so forth. But 50%, quite a bit in whatever study you do. And then number 5, research indicates that heavy social media use is linked to shorter attention spans and decreased ability to focus on tasks, particularly among younger users. I mean, like I said, I feel like these aren't necessarily groundbreaking statistics, but they're statistics I want us to think about and talk about and discuss. So, be on the lookout for that social media post for us to discuss in the comments. But let's move on to On My Feed, which is, again, my favorite segment. But this week, I want to discuss the op ed the U.S. Surgeon General wrote in the New York Times. So, earlier this week, or I guess when you're listening to this episode, it will be earlier last week, the U.S. General Surgeon wrote about how he is asking for there to be a warning label on social media platforms similar to the warning labels on cigarette labels. I'm obviously not going to read this entire article to you. I will, however, link it in our newsletter, but I did want to mention a few bullet points. So, they are: past warning labels have significant effects on behavior. In 1965, after a landmark report from the Surgeon General, Congress voted to require all cigarette packages distributed in the United States to carry a warning that using the product may be hazardous to your health. Thus began a 50-year decline in smoking. When the warning labels first appeared, around 42% of US adults were daily cigarette smokers. By 2021, that portion had dropped to 11.5%. Technology companies, though, are likely to argue that the science on the harmful effects of social media is not settled. They will also invoke free speech law, arguing the government cannot force companies to carry a product warning, which is sometimes described as compelled speech. For more than a decade, cigarette companies have successfully used, and so it also was tying in where it was talking about if this goes to court, when it goes to court, that the tech companies, like, it's comparing and contrasting, cigarettes versus social media, but it was saying that cigarette companies have successfully used a first amendment argument to fend off a requirement that they print a graphic photograph of diseased lungs on tobacco products. He also called on tech companies to make changes to share internal data on the health impact of their products to allow independent safety audits and restrict features like push notifications, autoplay, and infinite scroll, which he says prey on developing brains and contribute to excessive use. That was a lot. Personally, I agree with the US General Surgeon. I love my job and I see the power social media has to make great change in the world, but I'm also not naive to see all the negative effects social media has on our society. My hope is that by the time I have kids, is that they understand that social media is a choice. And what I mean by that is they get to decide what and where they consume content. Because I know that by the time I have kids, conversations that I will have to have with my children and even my nieces and nephews is the difference between AI content and like real content. I've been on Facebook recently. Like, I feel like for a while there, I wouldn't log on to Facebook as much, but I have lately. And it's funny. It's not funny. It's not funny, but it kind of is. I have to laugh about it. Otherwise, I get really scared. But it's funny to me at how creepy certain articles or blog posts or Facebook posts, they're using AI as the thumbnail image, but they look creepy real. And I know that I'm going to have that conversation where already as a millennial, I grew up with Photoshop images, but the magazines didn't have to say, oh, this was Photoshopped. So it led us to believe models had no pores. And again, I like we still like we're still doing that, and we're thinking that women's bodies with curves don't have stretch marks or cellulite. And that's something I've had to unlearn as a 30-year-old. And so I'm scared for the younger generations, and I know, like, I applaud Instagram and Facebook because I do know they have that feature now where it's like you do have to mark that if it was created with AI, there's going to be like this a little tag that says like this is AI. But again, it's small. It's a small thing where I think it already has. It's going to damage, I don't know. I don't want to say children's views, but again, I feel like I'm comparing it, and I do feel like it is a good comparison of like us growing up with these Photoshop images, not knowing they were Photoshop, and then maybe it is like we're making some progress by saying like this image is AI, but I don't know. That is my hope. My hope is that, in conclusion, my kids are actually going to be like their father and like not really care about social media or want to be on it, but I know that's hopeful thinking. And again, I also want to emphasize like I do love social media. I see the change that social media and the impact it has for the greater good, but you have to take the pros and the cons together. And I feel like as social media marketers, maybe this is me saying like I feel it is my responsibility to discuss that with you, this audience, but also my audience and other business owners and just my friends in general, where these are conversations I think we need to be having because we are addicted. And at the end of the day, it's social media. Like, yes, it is our job, but we are not surgeons. We are not saving lives. Maybe we can help with the mental health movement more by us being more real and relatable and authentic in this way and talking about this stuff. So clearly you guys now know where I stand on it. Like I love what I do and I love social media, but I'm not going to be naive and sit here and be like, "Oh, no, social media does not affect our mental health." It does. And I just think something like the warning labels, it's gonna subconsciously, s- like as the young children's minds are developing, again, it's a choice. We're just like smoking is a choice. And if you know that it's going to, there are still those smokers who they know it can cause lung cancer, but they don't care. And here we are as social media marketers. I think we all know that it can impact our mental health, but here we are. Here we are. So, okay, I think I'm done with that Madeline rant, and we can move on to our topic today, which, again, what a great segue into today's topic. So, I know that every week Jessica and I say how much we love the topic that we're discussing, but clearly, if you haven't gathered by now, this is mental health is a very important topic for me, especially since it's something I've struggled with. I think it not in the beginning. So I've started my business in 2018, but I've been helping businesses with their social media since 2010. And so I've really seen social media evolve, like the social media platforms. I was of sound mind when all the social media well, not all, because I don't think I was, and when I say of sound mind, I just mean like could grasp it per se. And while yes, the MySpace, I feel like Jessica was honestly more into MySpace than I was, but I just mean like we've seen it evolve, and that's also one of my favorite things about social media. Like, it is so cool to see how it has evolved into what it is today, and I am excited to see how it evolves in the future. But with that being said, it has really affected my mental health, and there has been times where I I think even now I'm still coming out of burnout where there were times where I would dread getting just logging on to Instagram, but I had to do it. Had to do it for the clients, for my livelihood. And that's something I don't think we talk about enough, is that there are times where you want to burn it all down. You want to delete your account once a week, and you can't. I mean, you can, but when it's your job and your livelihood, you feel as if you have no other choice but to keep going and keep pushing through, which is why I thought this would be a great topic for this week, especially with it being summer. And I know in the group, I keep seeing, like, why is engagement down? Like, all this stuff. And I just hope this episode is like a breath of fresh air and a good breather and a good reminder to go outside and get fresh air. So let's begin. So I have 10 tips, I guess, that you can use for your mental health, or these are just things that have helped me better my relationship with social media, with what I do every day. So number one is setting boundaries in general. So setting boundaries on the type of clients you agree to work with, setting boundaries on when you will respond to messages, boundaries around holiday time off, and your office hours, which brings me to number 2, and that is summer hours. If you are a solopreneur or an agency owner, or just, again, you're your own boss, you get to set the rules. And this is something that I think it wasn't something that clicked in my brain until maybe a year and a half ago, where I'm like, oh yeah, it's my business, my rules. I get to decide. So, something to consider, or I'm hoping you guys consider, is maybe implementing summer hours year round, where you end your workday at 2 or 3 p.m. every Friday. Because let's be honest, how productive are you actually on Fridays? And that's for the corporate girly pops and boys as well. How productive are we on Fridays? Like, I feel like Fridays, I leave my easy to dos for Fridays. I leave my mindless tasks for Fridays, even when I do end on at 2 or 3 p.m., because it's Friday. Like, for whatever reason in my mind, like, it should be a 3-day weekend. The weekend begins. So that's just something to consider. And also, how productive are you actually on Fridays during the summer when the weather's nice outside? I'm gonna leave that dramatic pause there for you guys to consider. Number three. So, well, that also is a great segue into number three, which is self care Saturdays or best self Saturdays. So, I was listening to the Every Girl podcast last week, and I know it might be weird that I'm bringing up another podcast on our podcast, but if you're a podcast junkie or obsessed with health and wellness like me, you need to listen to this one episode that I'm about to mention. But I'm also obsessed with the host, Josie Santi. I hope I said her last name right. I'm honestly the worst at pronunciation, but I'm also manifesting that we become online besties. But her Hot Girl Summer Tip podcast episode, which again, I will be sure to link in our newsletter, she mentioned her best self Saturdays, and I've decided that is what I too will be calling my self-care Saturdays moving forward. On this episode, Josie talks about how she uses her Saturdays to better herself overall, meaning, or she talked about how she'll do some cleaning, she'll do some self care, whether it's an everything shower or a mask or something like that, or, even going to a farmer's market. Again, you need to listen to this episode. But she also mentioned that she'll do work on Saturdays, which honestly, how she described her best self Saturdays, that is also how I spend my Saturdays, but I've just called them self-care Saturdays. But then I'd get the people who'd come for me and be like, "But you did work. Like the weekends, like you're not supposed to work, like you're a workaholic." And it's like, "No, no, no. Like I work on Saturdays because in my brain, like I may not have been as productive on a Wednesday, or like some of the tasks that I wanted to get done during the week, I just was not able to get done. So I just like in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do it on Saturday and it gets done." But I really loved how she describes that. And so my point is maybe it's not even Saturdays. Maybe it's a Thursday. I don't know, but because honestly, I think you should do some form of self care every single day, whether that's a hot girl walk or a walk in general, or getting your favorite coffee at your coffee shop. I think every day you should do a little something like that. And I know that right now on the internet, I feel like as a society we're kind of poking fun at that, especially for millennials, where it's like, "Ooh, I get a little treat." Again, I can't think of it, but we treat ourselves, but as we should, in my opinion. Okay, number 4. I love that I go on these little rants, and hopefully you guys stick with me through them. But number 4, visualizations and meditations. I really try to envision my days the night before. So I will make time for a meditation, and although I might not do a meditation every day, I have noticed when I do, I'm able to focus better. And for those of you who know, you know, but I have ADHD, and if you've been listening or following me, you know I have been off my Concerta, which is like Ritalin, like Adderall, but I was on that for 20 years and I've been off of it now for 2 years. So I'm still currently in the phase of figuring out how to function as an adult slash presentable person to society with ADHD. And the visualizations really help me. So what I will do when like an hour or so before I go to bed, I will seriously, I will envision myself getting out of bed, turning off my alarm and not pressing snooze. That's important because that's also a habit I'm really trying to break currently. So not pressing snooze, then going and envisioning my morning routine. So something I like that is very important to me is reading 10 pages from a book, from a self-help book or a business book, journaling and moving my body. Like you guys know that I am a AM workout girly. So I'll envision that. I'll then envision me getting into the shower, doing my skincare routine, all that stuff. But that help I don't know how to explain it, and I feel like there's been studies done on it, but it just when I visualize it, it helps me stay. I find or I found that it helps me stay focused more. And of course, like my to do list too, like I have so many to do lists, but I've mentioned that I've started to use Motion, which I highly, highly recommend. But I'll use Motion more so to help me with my block scheduling, which we're going to get to here in a second for number 5. But I'll also make a to-do list where I write it down in the steps, because what I've learned about ADHD is that we do what makes life, I don't know if that's correct to say, but my challenges that I face every day is being overwhelmed and hyper focusing on things. So I I feel like this was probably a TikTok too, where a non-neurodivergent person, let's say, get out of bed to go and work out. They're like, oh, okay, get out of bed, go work out. But for somebody like me, I'm like, okay, I get out of bed, I turn off my alarm, I put on my clothes, I brush my teeth, I have to put my shoes on, then I have to remember the fob key to get into the gym. So it's just that is how my brain works. I have to remember all those steps just in order to get to the gym. I where I was going with that, where I was going with that, oh yeah, meditation visualizations, meditations and visualizations. Highly recommend, especially if you too are ADHD neurodivergent like I've really found that that helps me focus better and just am in a better mood when I do that. Okay, number 5, schedule time blocks and breaks. I know that Jessica and I both time block religiously, and in those time blocks, we also include breaks and things like our self care. So, like facials, like a mani pedi. I even have gone as far as to time block my weekends, which might seem very excessive, but it helps me function. Um, and so again, so maybe if you're not time blocking yet or are struggling with time blocking, a few ideas you could do is time block client work, where certain days you work on certain clients, certain days you work on certain tasks, yada, yada, yada. Number 6, move your body. Personally, I enjoy going to a workout class where I'm going to sweat and I am challenged mentally. I know that Jessica has mentioned anytime she feels overwhelmed, she knows it's time to get up and move her body. And ever since she said that or told me that, that's something I've been trying to practice and implement as well. And I can't, I don't know if I've been successful of that. I, there's days, we have our days where I'm better about taking breaks and getting up to stretch my legs and move my body, but I am not perfect. Number 7, don't take things personally. I know that this is easier said than done, especially when it feels like maybe you're handed back a content calendar and your client has given you, like, they basically, it's almost like you're back in school and your teacher like marked the entire paper up with a red pen, like that feeling. And it's hard not to take it personally because I know for me, when something like that has happened, the little voice or little devil on my shoulder starts to be like, you're not good at your job, and all those negative voices come start to creep back into my mind. But this is a book I didn't write that. I'm just realizing I didn't include this in my notes, but I'm going to include it now. For days like that, and just in general, something that I have found when the negative self-talk is turned up on full blast, listening to affirmations has really helped me. Because let me tell you guys, full transparency, I still do. We're working on it in therapy, but I used to have the worst negative self talk. The worst. Like, you guys, I was so mean to myself. So mean. So mean. Like, I can't even express to you how, like, I feel like I'm being very dramatic right now, but it was bad. Like, it was really bad. And it would paralyze me. And I notice it still does paralyze me. So, what I do to help with that is I listen to self affirmations. I found that I've really loved, and I, again, shameless plug, we'll put it in our newsletter. This newsletter is getting quite long. That's okay, though. That's okay. But I'll link the one that I really like, and that I kid you not, I listen to it every morning. And if I now listen to it as I'm getting ready, putting on my makeup, I just, it's been a game changer. Game changer. Okay. Number 8, mute accounts that make you feel less than, or accounts where you find yourself comparing yourself to whoever constantly. I know that as a social media manager, I follow a lot of other social media managers, and I love being able to build relationships that way. But I'd be lying if I said there aren't social media managers and even agency accounts that I have had to mute, because I would constantly find myself comparing my chapter 2 to their chapter 20. And I I can speak for Jessica Harmony and I, because this is a conversation we've had in person, but also in our Slack, where we've revealed to each other like certain accounts where I'm like, it's just good to also find that support system where I hope, like, I don't, how do I want to say this? You need to find your tribe, but also it comes down to your mental health. Like, and because they also don't need to know, where it's not them. Like, okay, that's how I want to end this tip. It's not a them thing. It's a me thing. And I know that, and I think that's good to acknowledge, where you mute them in honor to, like, respect yourself, I think, and them to a point, but more so for you, where it's like, it's a you thing. It's not a them thing. Like, they're great and they're killing it. But again, stuff that hopefully, if you need it, therapy as well, like, that's just stuff you're working on with your therapist. So that concludes number 8. Number 9, cycle syncing. So, for our very small male demographic, you can skip over this one, or you can stick around if you have a partner, sister, friend, whatever. But learning more about my cycle has been a game changer. I know, I feel like I've said game changer a lot this episode, but this one has been the most, not just game changing, but life changing. So, I don't think it's a surprise to any of you listening that it should be a surprise. It's just the sad truth that we as women, as girls, we're not taught about our cycles or our periods in general, like at all. If you are a millennial, if you are my age 30 or a little bit younger, you'll remember that book. I can't recall the name of it, but it's like it should like it explained like your mom gave it to you so that they didn't have to explain periods to you. And so I'm making it my mission to learn more about my cycle to be able to educate my nieces and honestly my nephews as well and my unborn babies so that we can better the next generation and that they just feel more empowered. And I do believe that if you can understand your cycle and what you should eat during each cycle, what task you should do during each cycle. So, for instance, like, of course, I didn't write this down because also I don't have them memorized yet, but I know, like, I think it is during ovulation where you're feeling the most social. So, it's like during ovulation, that's when you should be scheduling your meetings and networking events and all that stuff. But so that way too, you don't feel like, let's say you're packing your calendar with your social events during, I don't want to get this wrong. Like you're I'm not even going to try. But during a period or a certain time you shouldn't, you're going to feel awful about yourself. Like that's a lot of what my research and reading that I've been doing is basically I just want to not feel like a sack of poo poo, you know? Like like I want to make sure that I'm really using each phase of my cycle to excel and respecting that like during like my menstrual cycle like rest. And something that I found shocking was that if you do excessive workouts or really hard workouts during your menstrual cycle, like that can cause weight gain. Not that I'm personally or have ever been one to really want to work out during my period. Like, no, because I literally feel like a sack of poo poo. Um, but still, I thought that was I have friends who will, you know, and it's just like I let them know that, and it's just like wow, like we should actually just be doing yoga and like deep stretching during that time, and like yeah, getting maybe more than 8 hours of sleep. I don't know, but in conclusion, learning our cycles is another topic that I think is important for us as online business owners and business owners in general, women in general, as a society in general. The end. Just kidding, we have one more. The last, number 10, is therapy. I told you guys on my 30 life lessons podcast episode, investing in a good therapist, like best advice, best piece of advice I could give you. That was one of them. And I owe I owe my life, literally, my life to my therapist. Yeah, I feel like I'm also lucky in the fact that I think almost all my friends have therapists, and I think all but one has doesn't have a therapist. I could be wrong. But we also discuss what we talk about in our therapy sessions and are so open to it. And I know that a lot of actually I could tell you all my friends who have therapists, their parents do not have therapists. And I'm just lucky that or lucky and thankful. I think thankful is the word I'm looking for in the fact that we are a generation who is talking about mental health and not being okay, and having those serious conversations. And maybe if you're listening and just you aren't completely sold on the therapy idea, or you might have had not the greatest therapist. And I've definitely been in that. Like when I was younger, I didn't have the greatest therapist and was kind of turned off by them for a while. But I hope you give it another chance. But I hope you guys found this episode helpful. I hope you found it encouraging, inspiring, fun. I don't know. Let me know though, right? Like if you guys would be the best if you would write us an Apple but wherever you're listening review. I was actually looking at our Apple reviews the other day, and not to be selfish, but I don't think that we have any reviews that mention both Jessica and I since me joining the podcast. So like, I don't know, maybe stroke my ego a little bit more and like let me know what you guys thought of this episode, what episode or what topics you guys would like us to cover in the future. If you guys would like to like a part 2 of this one, or just want to talk about these deeper things. And because we're here for you, like we are here for you to vent, which I know that a lot of you guys do in the Facebook group, which continue to vent because we're here for it. I promise you, because what you're saying, we also have gone through or are going through. And I just wish I could give you guys a big hug. So I'm sending you one through the airwaves. But especially if you guys are going through a hard time or just feeling lonely, lost, anxious, overwhelmed, know that you are not alone. Like you are not. You are not. So, thank you again, and we will catch you on the airwaves here next week. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you haven't already, hit that follow button, and if you really love us, be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening from.
And if you want to be one of our online besties, you can shoot us a DM over at #managed on Instagram and let us know what your biggest takeaway was from this episode. Or, you could also share all your deepest, darkest secrets. Kidding, but we mean it when we say you can shoot us a DM. We love building real, authentic relationships with you.